Hey, everybody. Welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I'm Chris Peters. He is Cam Robinson. And Cam, so much to get to today, so much to get to every day. But before we do that, how you doing, pal?
I'm doing well. Got back from the rink already today. It's been a good morning when you get a skate in there first thing. How about you, man? How you doing?
It's good. I wish we had morning skates too, but with our kids, we are typically the night shift. So so we've got a lot of we got 8U practice tonight. Looking forward to that. And honestly, I mean, what a fun time of year. I'm sure your kids are going every which way. Mine are as well. And it's a lot of fun. And honestly, right now we're kind of in the mid-season mode, and a lot of people are starting to look towards various things. We've got Four Nations coming up. You got the AHL All-Star game, the only All-Star game, by the way, which we'll have for you on FloHockey. No NHL All-Star game this year. And then all this stuff that's happening throughout the leagues. And certainly it's midterm ranking season as well. A lot of those have come out. We saw Central Scouting. We talked about that last week. We talked about that and talked about other rankings that have come out. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the Elite Prospects January ranking. But before we get to that, there is a prospect that is absolutely popping off right now that has already been drafted, that has already been heavily scrutinized. But over the last month, he has been sensational. So we're going to start today's show by talking about 2024 number 5 overall pick, Ivan Demidov, currently with SKA St. Petersburg, and he is absolutely torching the KHL over the last few weeks. Cam, this is a guy that we had a lot of discussions about, the people in our industry and the scouts that actually have to do this and make these high level decisions, these very expensive decisions at the top of a draft. But suddenly we're looking at a player that is at 37 points this season, is closing in on the U20 scoring record in the KHL. What are we seeing from this guy? Clearly he is starting to make good on a lot of those projections that we had for him last year.
What was he doing sitting there at number 5 for Montreal? Hey, just a
Being a little too Russian,
wrapped so neatly and sitting there waiting for them at number 5. Remember we were in Vegas last year and we were all trying to put together what the top of that draft board was going to look like. And we're like hearing the day before, maybe Anaheim, they like Beckett Seneca. Maybe they like Z Buyam. We're like, why doesn't anybody like Ivan Demidov? Like we were going down the list. We're like, number 2, Chicago doesn't like him. Yeah. You had to. Columbus, they're not interested. It's like, why weren't these teams knocking guys down? And I get it. He's Russian. I know that there was some, worries about how long he's going to stay, or like, why wasn't he playing in the KHL last year? He wasn't getting challenged, but like, kid has some serious juice, and now he's just proven it. And I mean, I was one of those ones saying get him in the K last year, that it felt like they were holding him down, like Scott does sometimes, where they hold a player down a little bit longer and then be like, hey, sign an extension and all this first power play minutes, they could be yours. But it seems like it didn't hurt him developmentally, because like you said, he started out the year and he was still like, he was getting fourth line minutes, seeing 9-10 minutes, and he was still produce. Now he's starting to see some minutes, and now he's really just popping off. I think for Montreal fans, like, I'm sure you're already very excited about this kid coming, but there hasn't been a player in Montreal that's going to get you out of your seats like Demidov in a really, really long time. And so he's going to have a really fun and bright future in Montreal, and it's going to be great. It's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, so it was interesting that GM Kent Johnson, their head scout Nick Bobrov, and Vinny Lecavalier, who was a senior advisor with the team, they all went to St. Petersburg on, I believe it was December 19th. And in the couple games before that, it had been a while since Demidov had scored a goal in the KHL before that visit. And I think the visit wasn't necessarily anything more than, hey, let's let them know that we love them. Let's also have a quick conversation with the folks at SKA to make sure that they understand, why we're here and what we'd like to see. And since that meeting, and there's a couple of other things that have happened that have allowed Demidov to get increased usage. But since that visit, and he did score in that game that they watched, and I think that might have been Kent Hughes' first time seeing him live in a game. 17 points in the 11 games since that visit. 10 goals in that span as well. If he was all over social media the other day with an absolutely viral goal from the KHL, just showing that incredible skill that he has. But there have been a lot of other things. He's getting regular power play time now. He's had his season highs in minutes over the last week, where he played, I think, close to 23 minutes in one game, close to 20 in another game, both season highs. I want to go back to last year, though, Cam, and think about all of the reservations that you could have had about Ivan Demidov, and there were many, because not just because he was Russian, but because of what you mentioned. At SKA, they did not use him in the KHL. He played 4 KHL games during the regular season. He was a 2-point per game player in the MHL. So the MHL, if you're looking at production in that league and you're trying to parse things out anymore, it's getting much more difficult. It's not as good of a league as it was. There are more teams. But you can still watch the player, and the eye test tells you Demidov is outstanding. But now looking back, it seems like he's taken every necessary step here to be an impact player in the NHL next season. I mean, like, so his contract is expiring. They'll have the opportunity. That's what kind of makes him unique. I mean, go back to last year though. Were there any reservations that you had? And I you'll have to refresh my memory about where you had him last year. But I mean, really, you know, just thinking about, there were reservations to be had for reasons that really didn't have anything to do with on the ice.
Yeah, I think my nitpicking at the time, where it's like he wasn't being challenged, and so you saw some kind of bad habits start to creep into his
Mm-hmm.
game, right? Where there was, he's kind of floating around a little bit, just waiting for an opportunity, and then he would try to deke out, 2 or 3 guys and score a highlight reel goal. Well, the cool thing is that he was able to do it for a good chunk of those opportunities, right? But they weren't translatable habits. Now, when he's doing those highlight reel goals against the KHL, well, you know what? That's getting a little bit closer to being translatable, because if you're pulling that off in the KHL, then it's not a huge leap to being able to do that at the NHL level too. So, I thought he was highly, highly electric and dynamic, and that he was the second best prospect on pure upside in the class easily. And so I get that. I understand if you're the decision maker and you're sitting there and you're like, like, we're not going to have any control over this player next year. If he signs an extension, we might not have control over him for multiple years. Maybe we'll just go a little bit safer. Maybe we'll take the big defenseman who's already in North America and who we can put in our AHL system next year. Maybe we take the kid out of the OHL who's like skyrocketing down the end of the year, and he's got a projectable frame, a big body, got great hands. I understand we'll take the power forward who's from the West. We know what to expect, those type of things. But at the end of the day, it's like, goals are what pay the bills. And if you're going to be drafting at the top of the draft, I know it's a killer if you miss. Like, if you miss on a top 5 pick, like, that is devastating for the organization. But if you hit big, right? Hitting singles is cool and everything, but like swinging for the fence early on, I'm a big fan of that. And again, I'm not the one sitting there on the hot seat, or maybe, have an owner breathing down my neck being like, you screw up and you lose your job. But passing on a kid like Demidov, letting him slide to 5, I think is going to haunt a couple of people there in that top 5.
Yeah, it very well could, and obviously, as it does with every single player, time will tell ultimately what the best decision was. And my reservations definitely were, I have an understanding of why the team would not put him in the KHL. I have an understanding of, like, hey, he's not, maybe not part of our long-term plans. And also, SKA is one of those teams that is legit depth, a legit depth team where it's hard for them to get a young player in there. But I also felt, like you did, like he was being held back. Now, I did have Demidov third last year on my list. I had him right behind Levshinov. I thought, if you're when you consider the risk factor and other things, you have a potential top pairing defenseman versus a potential top line wing. I think in a lot of cases, there's most people, if it's between a wing and a defenseman and you feel like they're close enough, you take the defenseman. And that was kind of ultimately, in the end, my assessment. Now, you fast forward to this year, and as you said, you see what he does against pros, and success at the U20 level, as he is, 19, just turned 19 in December. success at that level in pro hockey is a much more translatable, uh, kind of evidence. And so he's getting with that power play time, like Tony DeAngelo left Ska and suddenly he got power play time, so like they move one guy and then they get power play time. And with that has come numbers. And also I didn't have a lot of faith in that team having that player's best interest at heart when he was on an expiring contract. And I've been pleasantly surprised to see that they were smart enough to realize, oh, we should maybe play one of our best players more. He's top 20 in KHL scoring right now. He's 5 points away from breaking, or he'll tie Kirill Kaprizov with the all-time U20 scoring lead. He had 42 points. He won't quite get there in his few games. There is a points per game difference. Both Kuznetsov, Michkov, also in front of Demidov on a points per game basis. But he's going to have one of the most games played by any U20 player in that league's history as well, on top of all of these numbers. So to me, that says, and we have a question about this later, but to me, that says this is translatable, not just it's also translatable quickly, because we're seeing what Michkov is doing right now. Now, is he perfect? No, but he is doing things here. Here's the other thing I wanted to bring up about Demidov. How much was Montreal criticized for passing over Michkov in that draft a couple of years ago, to the year before, I should say? And think about who is, we mentioned Nick Bobrov, the head scout. He's from St. Petersburg. He's one of the guys that could see these guys. So if you were to say, and there was no hesitation with Demidov. They obviously passed on Michkov, but no hesitation with Demidov. So that also tells you a little bit something. But we have either ors later. This is not one of them. So we're gonna spoil one now. But if you had the choice between Michkov and Demidov, Cam, based on what we've seen, yeah, I'm putting him on the spot. I did not prepare him for this one. So if you're watching, you're just seeing Cam like, oh, here we go. But like, this is a tough. I think it's tougher than people might think. So probably not for people in Montreal because they have their opinions. But what would you do if you were say they were both in the same draft year and you had to choose?
So I had someone ask me this. I tweeted something about Demidov and just how he's tearing it up, and someone was like, "Who would you pick, Michkov or Demidov?" And I could just see the two fan bases like inching closer to me with their pitchforks ready to pounce. And I was like, "Don't make me choose." So I just took the coward's route and I didn't answer. And then you just come out of nowhere and you're like, "Let's light these torches
That's
back
right.
up here." Hey,
I'll
I
get
will
them
say
with you.
too with that,
I'll
you'll get yeah, okay, you got to put your one out there too. Hey, I will say that I really, really like Matvei Michkov. I really liked him in his draft year. I thought he was, again, a top 3 level pick who should not have slipped as far as he did. And I was one of the ones that, held the Canadiens' foot to the fire for passing on him for David Reinbacher, because I understand the logic, especially for like an organizational need, a big defenseman. But when you have like super high level skill sitting there, it is so hard to get that in any other way than to draft it. So when Montreal passed on Michkov, I thought that was a mistake. When they took Demidov, I thought that was the right move, and they nailed it. And like you said, there didn't seem to be a hesitation. And maybe they knew some stuff that we had heard about. Some of the things around Michkov, around the length of his contract, maybe that was more concerning, about maybe like how he handled the with Ska and then transitioning over to Sochi, just some of those dressing room dynamics. But if we're talking pure skill, and I'm sitting there at the draft table and I got to pick one of them, I'm taking Ivan Demidov. And I think he's just that much more dynamic. I think he's got better handles. Mishkov's got the better release. I think on an IQ basis, I'd probably give the edge to Demidov too.
really.
I do. I think I hedge, and I know one's got 35 or 40 points in the NHL already, and the one's playing in the K.
Right.
So it's a little unfair. But if I'm talking especially I'm looking at them like as draft eligible prospects, I think I would hedge. I think I would lean Demidov. So now you're gonna have to say Michkov so that the show doesn't get cooked in Philly here, right?
Well, I'm. It's okay, and this doesn't have to be a good radio situation because I am picking Michkov, and the reason being, I feel personally from a pure offensive understanding, offensive know-how, I do think that there is a gap between the two, hockey sense wise, between Mitch. That's not to say that I think Demidov is dumb or anything like that. I do not say that is not what I'm saying.
You heard it here
I'm
first.
saying that of the players, yeah, exactly. That's getting clipped.
Yeah.
But as players and especially as prospects, I do think that there is something about the way Michkov sees the game that is different and is special relative to him. I think that in terms of power, strength, skill, I could give the edge to Demidov. I do think that Michkov's a better player. I also give the Demidov the edge on compete as well. Those are
Mm-hmm.
significant factors, but for me, hockey sense is always the biggest thing. And the other thing is that Michkov is translating that to points. He is translating that to scoring. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, he has a tremendous shot. It's not just that he has a great shot. I think he's just really knows how to shoot. Has a great sense of time and space, what I think a lot of great goal scorers do. And I think as his team improves around him, he is only going to get better. I'm very excited about him. I don't think there's a huge gap between the two. So I want to make that very
No.
clear. And I think when we talk, and I think a lot of our listeners will say, well, if you like this guy, then more than this guy, you're, for one, you're probably evil, terrible, and awful, but you're also an idiot. So, you've got all of those good things going for you. But really, we're probably splitting hairs here. Like if you're going to do a prospect ranking right now, yes, I would have or a U23 ranking or something like that. Yes, I would probably have Michkov slightly ahead. But what Demidov is doing is absolutely making me recalibrate my opinion of the player. And I think, if I were to go back and do a redraft of last year's draft, then yes, I would put Demidov ahead of Levshinov on my ranking. I have more information now. The things that
Mm-hmm.
I had as questions about Demidov have now been answered. So now we can move on. That's the thing, is that as we get more information, opinions can change and they will change and they should change at times as
Shocking.
well. But yeah, so so there we go. See, now Montreal can come after me, Philly can come after you. Everybody is
I'll
in their
take that.
camps. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I personally would not like the ire of either, but here we are. We're drawing, and believe me, I brought this on us. I did not prep anybody for that. We just did it.
I got to go to Montreal in like 2 weeks for this Four Nations, so I had to be nice, right? I got to get my karaoke in with the boys, a little late night poutine. I don't want people coming after me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we will have to talk about the Four Nations a little bit later as well, and we will. But I'm fascinated. For me, we are in a golden era of young hockey players coming into the NHL. You think about the guys like Michkov, like Lane Hudson, like Celebrini, like Bedard, like all of these players that have come in the last couple of years. And now you can add an Ivan Demidov to the mix. You can add the other the James Hagens and whoever else, and Michael Mises and Matthew Schaefer's and whoever else is coming from this next class, and all the kids from the last class. We are in such a golden era for prospects, and I think it's a lot of fun, and it makes what we do more fun, and also it can make us look like huge idiots if we had the wrong opinion just now. So let's look into the
Sweep those
future
away.
now. So we got through Ivan Demidov. Let's look into the future. And Cam Robinson, of course, from Elite Prospects. Elite Prospects, a lot of prospect coverage, a lot of varying opinions, and a lot of people coming together. And it's not just Cam's ranking; it's the company's ranking. So it makes it interesting, almost like you would say like a real team out there. And you guys came out with your January rankings. And when we talked before the show, Cam, I kind of wanted to get a sense for your guys' biggest arguments, or at least your biggest gripes, maybe even with your team, because I think that everybody has their own opinion, everybody has the players that they're passionate about. But where were some of those things? So make sure you go over to Elite Prospects, and you go to that Draft Center tab, and you can go to so many other places to find the content. You can also watch their scouting meetings as well to kind of get a sense for these. So Cam, let's get into it. I think the top of your board looks pretty much similar to a lot of the other ones. Matthew Schaefer's at number 1, but who are some of the guys that really elicited the big debate for you and your team?
Yeah. So first of all, like you said, it is definitely like a collaborative effort when we do that, and we do try to mimic what an NHL organization would do in their ranking meetings and their scouting meetings. It's we all submit our lists previously. We kind of generate a working list and then we go from there. And it's basically like if it's your region, or if you have 15 reports on one player and I have one, your opinion is going to be more valuable than my opinion. So we do work on that way. It's merit based, but it is somewhat democratic as well. And so, for instance, one player, Cameron Schmidt, uh, I am on an island. I've got multiple game reports in for him, but the team sees him as a top 10 prospect despite acknowledging the risk that is associated with him. So we put him at number 10, even though I feel that he's probably better served in the back half of the first round. That his upside, the high end offense, the vision, the shot, the speed, all that is there, and it's warranted for a team to take a swing at him at maybe 15, maybe 20. But if it's me and I'm sitting there at number 8, number 9, number 10, 12, something like that, I'm going to have a hard time picking that player. Even though we look at players like Cole Caulfield, 5'8", a little bit bigger, not by much, but he's finding success at the NHL level, right? Logan Stankoven, 5'8", built a little thicker, plays kind of that heavier game, a little more defensive, has the leadership qualities, has all the great stuff in the room too, and he has the offense, and he's finding success. So we're starting to see some more players find that success when they're not very big. 5'7" is a tough hill to overcome. So if you watch the video, I go on a bit of a diatribe for 2 or 3 minutes on why I think Cameron Schmidt should be a little bit further down the board, and then we have everyone kind of coming back at me. So that's one player that we really debated on.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit more too, because I agree with you. I think that I like the player. I like the way that he plays. I like the things that he does. But let's just throw this out there in terms of numbers. In the history of the NHL draft, there have been 3 players that were 5'7" and drafted in the first round, period. One of them went 3rd overall in 1967. Ken Hicks for the Oakland Seals. Kyler Yamamoto went 22nd overall in 2017, and then Cole Caulfield went 15th overall in 2019. And so, to me, and there are a number of other players that are 5'8", but again, we're talking in the single digits here in terms of these players. So when we talk about prospects and size, one of the biggest shifts that I've had is I love those little guys. I wanted to believe. What you have to understand about smaller players in the NHL is that it takes a very special player to reach that echelon. And if you are convinced, basically the probabilities are not in Cameron Schmidt's favor that he is going to execute at a top 10 level. So and I'm sure that this is part of the discussion process as well. My sense is that you have to believe that Cameron Schmidt is a special 5'7" player in order to put him in the top 10. And if you believe that, that's fine. I think you're wrong, but you can believe that. But again, it's a risk assessment, right? Like, it's not just player evaluation, Cam. It's not just there is this level of, if you're saying that a player is a top 10 pick, there is such an investment of capital. And obviously, it's easier for us on the independent side because it isn't a multi-million dollar decision for us to put those players there. It also makes it great when we're right about those players, but it's very difficult. And so I think I'm in your camp with that. I thought that was a very interesting debate, but I mean, there's certainly, Cameron Schmidt certainly wasn't the only other one. And I don't want to move on too fast unless there's something else you wanted to say about that. But you just kind of look at the numbers and you look at the history and the different things in there. It's a tough sell, but again, it's also January, right? There's a lot of things that can shift over time and opinions can change, but that would be my 2 cents on that particular one.
Yeah, opinions can change for sure. The measuring tape never lies, though, unfortunately, right? You can stuff it down as hard as you want. It doesn't really change.
Yeah. some guys have said don't scout with a measuring tape, and I was like, every single scout scouts with a measure. They all have them
100%.
out.
Yeah.
I actually
We
remember
do a
at Cole
thing.
Caulfield. Go ahead, Cam.
No, you go. I want to hear this story.
Okay, I was just gonna say at Cole Caulfield's combine, he had been listed, I think, for part of that year as 5'6". And then he grew just in time for the combine. And I asked him, how good did it feel to see a 7 pop up on your height? Because because he was like, it was a relief, because like basically like that was a thing. Like if you're 5'6", you're not getting drafted in the first round somehow. So, but I
Right?
think, and that was
Yeah.
a guy that scored 72 goals. So there's that too. But anyway, please continue.
Special player. I was gonna say what we do at EP is we do like the measurements by cam. So when I stand next to players and I interview them or I'm chatting with them, someone will sneakily take a picture, and then we can go back on it later and be like, Jackson Smith, yeah, he's 6'3". Porter Martone, he's 6'3", and then here's Cameron Schmidt. Like, yeah, that's a full head and a half. We do it. We got to get that guy on TikTok who like really breaks it down on how tall the shoes are and the angle of the camera. But yeah, measurements by cam. But yes, Cameron Schmidt was not the only one. Now, one player I wanted to bring up wasn't much of a debate in-house, but has garnered a lot of discussion by the masses, and that's Anton Frundell. Bobby Mack, he had his list, the 10 scouts that he talks to. I think Frundell was 5 on Mackenzie's list.
He was 5.
Craig Button's got him 2. We've talked about him in the past. We've talked about him on air. We've talked about him just, off air and just at these events and stuff. I was saying right before we came on here is that I probably had my best viewing of him this season. I just watched yesterday, the day before. It was a game from a couple weeks ago. Hockey Allsvenskan. It was 9.5 minutes of like good pace, feet removing, getting it on the forecheck, making a couple plays here and there, nothing fancy, and then one moment of brilliance where he made a move inside and he snapped it from long range and he finished. And I was like, great, that's a perfect game from a mid first rounder. Not special stuff. He's big. He's already physically mature. He's not popping off offensively. He has limits with his IQ, I think. I'm over here scratching my head, being like, what are they seeing that I'm not? Or what? Or where's the disconnect here? And so I think our group as a whole, where Frundell just keeps kind of sliding down the board. Nothing major, no big 20 spot drop, 10 spot drop, but we're just kind of like, is he a third line center? Is that where he's going to be? Because that's probably right around where he needs to be at 18 versus some of these outlets that are putting him in the top 3, top 5. He's kind of a consensus right around that, I guess 2 to 8 range. And we just do not see it at this point with Frundell. And so that was one that we had some fun with the masses anyways.
Yeah. And I think it is a tough one too, because I mean, we talked about it last time we talked about him. It's just if you saw him at at the end of last season before he got hurt, you were thinking this guy is going to challenge everybody for number 1. I mean, like he was looking like a legitimate, the size, the strength, the pure dominance of his age group. And this year it's been, I think the ice time starting to go up. He's been healthy for the longest stretch so far of the season. So I think there's been some improvement. I think some of his underlying numbers have improved as well in terms of, the amount of shots for the different, the possession numbers and the different things. It kind of depends on what tracking info you trust and other things like that, because it can be a little bit difficult with prospects. But, I think that there's such a, I think in this particular draft class, there's a weakness to it that I think you almost want to believe that Anton Frundell is more the guy we saw at the end of last season than what we've seen primarily this season. He does have 6 points in the Allsvenskan so far this year. You mentioned you saw, one of the games that he scored a goal. 2 of his goals have come since the turn of the new year. His minutes are going up as well with Djurgården. So it's an opportunity to potentially take a step. So I think he's trending in the right direction. The U18 5 nations that's coming up in U8 in February, I believe, is going to be one of those very important events. And then on top of that, a critical event is going to be the under 18 world championship in Texas in the spring, where everybody will kind of get another look at him in that kind of final salvo for his season. So I am probably between where he is on the consensus and where you guys are, but it's, again, I think it just comes down to the fact that there aren't a lot of players in this draft class that I can get super pumped about. But I did want to ask you about there were a couple of other guys on this list too that you guys had, and we had talked a little bit about the debate. And one is a guy that I'm fascinated by in this class, and he came in at number 12 for you guys, and that's Caleb Desnoyers. And I think he's another one where it's an interesting discussion, especially when you have Cameron Schmidt ahead of him. So that's the other thing. It's not just about the size. It's not just about where they land on the list, right? It's who beats that player out. I don't know that we would be able to find a single NHL scout that would agree that Caleb Desnoyers is behind that player. At the same time, how did he end up at 12? Where do you land on Mr. Desnoyers?
I've kind of gone up and down on him a little bit. My down wasn't so far down though, I must say. But Hattie, our QMJHL regional guy, him and I were kind of the only ones really championing Desnoyers, and Hattie had his chance to kind of go off, and we have a running Slack channel that we're constantly talking about this. Like there's discourse going on all day, every single day. So there's been plenty of opportunities for us to share our thoughts in that regard. But on the video, Hattie did his thing, and then I came in and I supported him. I really like, he is the best player on the best team in the queue. He leads that team in points by, double digits. Like it's like 15 or 20 points, I think. It's crazy how far ahead he is. He's super, super young. I believe he's the youngest player on the team as well. He's got size. He's got, I think he's got really strong IQ. He understands time and space really, really well. I think defensively he's smart, and all those things are projectable. Playmaking, really, I think he has some quality playmaking ability, maybe not like high end stuff, but a really safe floor, right? Like if you want to say like there's a third line center, I'll buy it, and it's like there's top six upside too. Now the knock is pace, right? Doesn't play the game with a lot of pace. Isn't overly quick or speedy, doesn't have a great top end gear. Those are going to hold him back a little bit. I think he does need to learn to play with more pace if he wants to translate up, and he's able to do that in the queue, especially against some of these lower level teams that they're just kind of feasting against as well. So for me, I have him higher than 12. I think I had him at 8 when I put my board in there. And I think that's about where I'd feel comfortable taking him too. There's a chance I could see him going 6 or something like that too, as a team looks for a center, and McQueen comes off the board at 4 or 5 or something like that. But I think that his body of work. There's also there's a reason that everywhere he goes, he makes teams, right? He makes the U18s as an underager. Goes to that CHL top prospects game, and he's the first line center, right? Not Michael Misa. It's Caleb Desnoyers. Like he gets all these opportunities in big situations, and it's because coaches love him, and that's not going away, and they love him for a reason. And so even if the pace isn't there yet, I have to hope and think that it's going to he'll be told eventually, like, this is how you need to succeed, and you have to play like this, and he'll adjust as necessary. And so I think he's a top 10 pick, even though we've got him at 12.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think he's a top 10 all day in this class. And I also think that he is one of those guys that there's predictability, there's repeatability. You know what you're going to get from him. It's going to be done at a fairly high level. He is going to compete. He is going to make things difficult for the opposing team. And when he can, he is going to contribute. He is going to produce. I think that the hockey sense, the anticipation, all those different things, I'm a huge fan of the player. I think he's going to, when my rankings come out in February, it'll be, he's going to be fairly high on my list, just as a to contrast with the 12th on your guys' list. And again, these are all varied opinions. Desnoyers was 7th among North American skaters for the NHL Central Scouting, and on Bob McKenzie's latest list, which includes a collection of scouts, he came in at number 6, right behind Anton Frundell. which is an interesting there
Rich.
as well. Yeah. So let's go. There's a couple more guys I know that we talked about that you want to go on. Who is another guy that you felt, was one where maybe you differed from and there was some hearty debate on? Because I think there's a lot. The thing is if you guys are debating these players, that's a debate that's happening in a lot of different, different rooms around the league. So, so what do you got? What do you got next for us there, Cam?
I'll bring out a couple centers. So Braden Coots, Seattle Thunderbirds. I haven't bought in on him all the way yet. We saw him at the Holinka. I've seen him live a few times. I've seen him on tape several times. He flashes for sure. Like some really, really high end stuff, some handles, some playmaking. Plays on not a great team there in Seattle. So it's when we'll get into that debate of circumstances and opportunity, and Radim Mertka has really helped me coming in and playing 39 minutes a night or whatever he's getting. But we have him at 13, ahead of a guy like Jake O'Brien, who's really seeing his stock climb as he's having a really strong year in the O, especially in the second half. It started off here. He had that great OHL prospects game showing. He's got bigger size. You can see like Jake O'Brien, when he stacks on another 20 or 30 pounds, 6'2", right, I believe he's a right shot center, he's going to be a force where I don't really see Coots having that level. And so that was another one that we debated internally. And there were some arguments on that. And, we've had him even higher, I believe, or on, some of our earlier boards too. So he's one that's kind of starting to level out a little bit. We had him at 13. I think he's probably better served in the late teens, early 20s, but we'll see how his back half goes. Another, potential U18 guy should be. And then the other one's Roger McQueen. And again, there wasn't a lot of debate on that player. We had him at number 5. He's basically been living at number 5. I was the only person who put him at number 4 this time around. And, don't ask me how I justified putting him up a spot when he hasn't played since October. And I guess I will tell you how I justified it, is that I slid Porter Martone down a hair because like I said last week, where I just have this like little nagging suspicion, this little fear inside me that Martone is not, people still call him like Mikko Rantanen. I'm like, he's just not that player. I need him to light I want to light a fire under him. I love Porter Martone too. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, as a human, like one of my favorite guys to see at the rink or see at the hotel or whatever and joke around with. Great guy, going to be a leader, going to be a really good NHLer. I just want to see him take that next step. And so I think on like an effort level, on a defensive level, on a physical level, premier position, Roger McQueen ticks a lot of boxes. And so I was watching some of his early season games there before the meetings, and I got reinvigorated on him. And I really hope he can come back healthy and then push into the mix even higher than that 5 hole, which I think he's kind of just locked in right now until he comes back and proves he's healthy and shows off again.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about McQueen a little bit more, but just to kind of put a finer point on that, specifically as it relates to Martone. The thing is when we're talking about guys in the top 5, if you do have that nagging suspicion, that's a good thing, because you want to know it. Like, that might say, okay, well, and in your case, it did move a player ahead of him. And those are those kinds of things where it's like, if I'm making that decision at 5th overall, I got to be certain. And if I'm not, then that's an issue. And there's all different ways that you can kind of sort into that. But we're gonna keep the draft conversation going and get into a couple of other topics in one of our favorite segments that we do every week. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for Beyond Belief. And we are going to start this one off with a Roger McQueen statement. So if you haven't seen the show or listened to the show before, this is where we take a statement. One of us will read it to the other. We'll decide whether it's beyond belief or if it is fact. And often fact also means it's our opinion. So it's not always quite as cut and dry as you would like. And this is one that is interesting. All right. So I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to start this off so that teeing up my partner here, Cam. Roger McQueen is a legitimate threat for number 1 in the 2025 NHL Draft.
Okay, so I'll tell you, back in August, I'm in Edmonton. I'm at the Holinka. I tweeted out, we might be looking at the 2nd overall pick right now at Matt Schaefer. And I got multiple texts from people on the NHL side immediately saying, like, one guy was like, why settle for 2nd? And I was like, okay, all right. And at that time, Schaefer wasn't even projected to go top 3. But one of them said, don't sleep on Roger McQueen at number 1. And because it was kind of everyone was thinking James Haggins, and then they made their case for why they thought McQueen would challenge for number 1. And then he went out and he was red hot, right? Red hot to start the season. But like the playbook on him is so unique. It's similar to what Caden Lindstrom was last year. Lindstrom was a little more raw. He was younger, more physical, probably a better shooter. McQueen has kind of a more all-around package, I would say, slightly taller. But then the similarities kind of unfortunately run into each other again, where the injury, right? Lindstrom missed so much time last year. He still went 4th overall. Now he hasn't played all this season. McQueen's been out since October. He's supposed to be back in the next couple of weeks. Early on, it was reported as a upper body injury, and everybody kind of assumed it was his back. I had one NHL source tell me it was a lower body injury. And I was like, I tend to trust these guys in the NHL a little bit more. And so I reached out to his agent and I was like, could you give me some clarification? And then I can put it out there and we can just like clear this up right now. People can stop comparing him and Lindstrom with the back injuries. And it was a no comment at this time. So we'll take that as we will. But hopefully he comes back healthy, because I think that is a true statement that he is a threat for number 1. Not to say that he's a front runner, not to say that he's going to get there, but I think that if he can come back and have a strong finish to his season, that a team is going to be sitting there at number 1 and they're going to have to think a little bit. And I think his name is going to be one of the ones, maybe even the one that's going to be next to Matty Schaefer as a consideration of, do we look at this 6'5" potential unicorn center, or do we look at this potential number 1 left shot D? So I do think that is a true statement.
All right. So that is your fact, beyond belief. You say true. I'm going to say beyond belief, and I'm going to say beyond belief, not for any reason of Roger McQueen, and it's all because of Matthew Schaefer. And it's also, I think that to me he'll be out for an extended period as well. Now so you're talking about 2 injured players, but we've got that book. And I also think that part of it is what happened with Caden Lindstrom. There is significant concern still about, if he's not going to play, it's too big of a risk to take. And so we'll see how McQueen comes back, and I might be eating these words later. But the question isn't, is he going to go number 1? It's, is he a threat for number 1? So I don't quibble with you that hard on that being beyond belief, but I turn it back over to you, and let's get back to another one of these topics that we've covered earlier in the show that we can dive a little deeper on here.
Okay, so we got a fun little Calder race going on this year in the NHL. I think
we do.
I think, we got some high scores. We got Dustin Wolf doing his thing, right? But
Absolutely.
Next year's class, forget about him. Right? Next year's class might not even have any 2025 eligibles even in the conversation. Might not any of them they might not be playing in the league. So is it going to be Ivan Demidov immediately stepping in as a legit Calder contender in 2025-26? Beyond belief, or is that true?
I think it's true, because we've got a little bit of history, because as we look at the 2024 race right now, it's probably more between Celebrini, Hudson. Wolf is absolutely in there, but Michkov is also in the discussion. I mean, he's been producing this year, and here's Matvei Michkov. We didn't think he would be around, so to me, I think that Demidov will walk in the next season as the betting favorite to be the Calder Trophy winner. Mainly because he's proven it at a professional level, having 37 points at this stage, having the stretch that he's on right now. And we'll see how the playoffs go. We'll see what happens when the season gets a little bit tougher. We'll see what happens in terms of his usage if SKA finds a better option for their power play. You never really know. But I personally feel that this is a player that is trending in a direction that is incredibly positive. The other reason that I think that Demidov has a chance to make that transition quickly, he's very strong. He is hard to knock off pucks. He's getting better at those elements of the game. And I think that the fact that he's played against pros will allow him to transition quickly. So you look at the different Calder Trophy winners in recent years, and a lot of them, Kirill Kaprizov, when he was a U20 player, he still had 3 years left in the KHL before he could come over. And then he came over and he won the Calder. No problem at all. Artemi Panarin, kind of relative unknown, but he comes in at 23 years old and is able to win the Calder as well. I just think that the way that Demidov is trending right now, the fact that he went from U20 hockey at a pretty low level to being a highly productive top 20 scorer in the KHL, to me, that suggests as a player that's ready to take that next step. And I think, it's going to be more about how the Habs insulate him as well. But as you see what Lane Hudson is doing this year in elevated minutes and in great opportunity, I think that they're going to have the ability to get him what he's going to need to be able to be a true Calder contender. So I turn it back over to you, my friend. I'd be curious if you could think of even others that, it's hard. You mentioned we may not see a 2025 NHL draft eligible in the mix this year. So, it's just what are your thoughts about
Right.
Mr. Demidov here?
I think you're spot on, and everything you said is right. I was sitting there being like, who's even going to be contending against him, right? Like Ryan Leonard will come out. Um,
Yep.
Maybe Gabe Perreault's probably going to come out, but like I don't know. Leonard should probably have a decent spot. Is like I don't know. I don't. Yeah, there's not a lot of guys that scream like this guy's kind of Zebuyam, maybe, right? If he comes out and
Yep.
plays a ton of minutes for Mini or something like that, like I don't know. Like I think it should be a pretty wide open field, and I think you're absolutely right. I think Demidov comes in as the betting favorite next year, especially if like Montreal is just like, hey, look at this, we've got a super skilled player. Let's play him a ton in offensive minutes, and then it should just take care of itself.
Yeah, I think opportunity is going to knock for him and he's going to be totally fine. And so I'm excited to see that transition. Just because we've seen it in the past doesn't necessarily mean that the transition will be rapid. Evgeny Kuznetsov needed a little bit of extra time to kind of get his NHL bearings under him. There are some guys that don't make the transition easily. He's also going to be doing it in a market that is highly scrutinized, a bilingual market, neither of which are his first language. So, it's going to be an interesting scenario for him to kind of walk into. But we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I want, you mentioned this before, and I'm excited on your behalf that you're going to be there for this event. But I'm curious, like in terms of buzz, excitement, different things. Cam, the upcoming Four Nations, the NHL Four Nations tournament, will it capture the hockey audience and lead to, growth and excitement and ratings and all those other things that we use to measure success?
I think it will. I think it will draw ratings. I think that it will, there will be a lot of interest in it. It's not an all-star game, right? Like that's what we're used to seeing over that February break. I do think the players are going to be up for it. They haven't had best on best hockey in a long time. Um, but I don't think it's going to grow the game because it's in the four countries that have probably, arguably four of the top five countries that have hockey depth and growth already, right? Like we're not catching any new fans, I don't think, from many of those countries. So I'm super excited for it. I know that there has been some like a little bit of concern on the NHL side of things about ticket sales early on there, that they weren't
Yeah.
flying off the shelves, that people weren't, super anxious to get them and make sure they had a spot there. But I think by the time it kicks off, we're going to get a Sweden versus Finland game. They hate each other, right? Canada, US, they hate each other. Like it's going to be awesome. Like when USA plays Sweden, maybe JT Miller's already traded, and we get that Pedersen Miller face off to start and see these guys cross checking each other and really letting everybody know how they truly felt, right? Like so there's going to be a lot of storylines. We're going to have brothers together. We're going to have teammates playing against each other, and everybody, it's all bets are off. And I do think that everyone's going to be playing. It won't quite be Olympic level, but I think that the players are going to want to win this. And maybe that's just me being hopeful, but I do think I'll say that's a true statement, that it will, for the most part, it'll capture the attention. I'm just super stoked to be there. I don't have to write any scouting reports for these guys. I'm there to watch, a whole heck of a lot of future Hall of Famers hopefully play their heart out with their national team jerseys on. So hopefully the fans in Montreal and Boston feel the same way, and everybody at home tuning in too.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm hopeful. I
Yeah,
will say that I'm not optimistic. Are those in direct,
I get
competition with
it.
each other?
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
international hockey. I mean, I just do. It's one of the things that even as a kid, like the '96 World Cup, I was 12 years old. Like that was a big deal. I feel like
big deal.
we're a little too cynical for those kinds of things, like those kind of made up tournaments, and that's kind of how I feel about the Four Nations. It is a best on best, but it's also not, because we are missing, a number of countries and a number of opportunities to see some of these other stars. And to me, it's also not the Olympics, like that's like,
Yeah.
all right, call me in a couple years. What I will say is that if every team is using this as an opportunity to figure out what their Olympic teams are going to look like, and if they're going to find out a little bit more about what that roster could look like, then that's great. And I hope they do some more experimental things, like try to toy with the standings a little bit, tiebreakers, all those different things. That's what I would like to see out of it. And I think, like the World Juniors, we love the World Juniors. It comes around every year. It's 2 weeks of hyper intense focus of the hockey world, or at least the larger, not the whole hockey world, but a good chunk of it. And then it's, as soon as the gold medal is handed out, it's over. And that's about it. They're, in terms of interest and other things like that. I think that no one really cares who wins this thing. But every single individual game is going to be entertaining. And that's I think a great segment. And then, it's the internet, so you get a chance to chirp at people, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. We got one more Beyond Belief. And I'm excited about this one because it comes with a visual aid. So if you're watching our show, you'll be able to see what we're talking about here.
Chris is very excited about this. The QMJHL's newest team, the Newfoundland Regiment, have the best name and logo in junior hockey. Show it to the people. Show it to the people.
Yeah, let's get a look at this here, Ever, if we can. And the regiment, it's a caribou head, is what we're seeing on the on there. And what I am fascinated by is the team name, the regiment. And the Royal Regiment is historic. We still don't have it up, but the Royal Regiment is historic to that town, to Newfoundland, or to the town province of Newfoundland. And it is also just like, I love that. So I didn't say what I said. It is fact. It is. I love this logo. I love this team name. I love everything about it. I love the rollout that they did. There's so many cool things that they did to get that going. And the other great thing about it is that hockey is back in Newfoundland. Newfoundland Growlers were, basically shut down last season because of financial reasons. They had a great logo. They had a great fan base. They had the great Terry Ryan come back, to make it work, and make his triumphant comeback at h 40, however old Terry is. I'm sorry, Terry, if I'm making it too old. But really impressive stuff from him. And so yeah, but unfortunately we didn't get the asset there. That's all right. But Cam, your thoughts, my friend?
Well, I think you're obviously forgetting the Sioux Falls Wiener Dogs. Okay, so clearly that's the number one.
When the temporary rebrand, that's a fair
right?
point.
The Wiener Dogs, they sent me out a jersey last year. I was over the moon. Like I've got it in the closet. I should have wore it for this show. That would have been perfect. I think it's awesome. And like you mentioned, the Growlers too. I love that logo too. Junior hockey is known for even going down to like the OJ. Like there's some really cool jerseys out there and some names. Some of my all-time favorite. I love the Seattle Thunderbirds, the T-Birds. I love their logo and their setup too. But I think these guys nailed it. And I think it's exciting to have junior hockey out there again. And I think they did a good job with the name and the logo.
Yeah. And I'm now being told we have the asset. We have the logo. So we want to show the good people that spent time watching the show. We're going to take a look at here. And there it is. And the caribou head, the crest, the regimental crest. The other thing that I love about any team names is when it has kind of like, it's not necessarily an animal, or it's there's a team concept in it. And a regiment is obviously a group of people, like the North Bay Battalion and all those other teams that have had kind of incorporated that. And I was telling Cam before, I went to a high school where our nickname was the Caravan, so it was always like this collection of people all going in the same direction. And you think about the World War I history that is so ingrained in Canadian culture. I just feel like this is such a winning mark for them, and that's a caribou. The caribou head, the woodland caribou. Let's be clear about that. And then the crown that you would see on that regimental crest, which is so cool. So congrats to the Newfoundland regiment on being not only a brand new team in the QMJHL, but a really good looking one. So thanks for popping that up there, Everett and Ever, and we will move on to our next topic of conversation. But boy, I can't get enough of that logo. Can't wait to see what the jerseys look like. We'll fully judge it when we see the full uniform, but that's some good stuff. All right. So Cam, you and I were a couple of prospect writers. We obviously follow these guys throughout careers. And I think one of the hardest things to tell people is to be patient, is to just
Yes.
wait, to just
Yeah.
wait. But we've noticed over both of our careers, and certainly as these players matriculate to the NHL, and maybe the expectations are set at a certain level, they don't always necessarily meet our immediate expectations. But you had brought this up pre-show, and I was like, we should definitely talk about this because I think that you have to manage expectations, and you also have to be aware that development is not a straight line. I say it so many times on any podcast I've been on and anything. It is not a through line. It is not predictable. Cam, you had one player in mind in particular that I think is a very good example of this. That is in the news as well after his exploits this in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, and so it's Adam Fantilli, right? I think he said he had like 70 friends and family at that game in Toronto, and paying to play that night, right? You got to pay to play. And he drops a hattie, right? First career hat trick. Mom's the first one to toss the hat over the glass, like just chef kiss stuff, right? Just you love to see it, warms the heart. But, we had this discussion in our Slack group too at EP. It's like Adam Fantilli was like less than a half point a game guy. Sean Monahan goes down. Fantilli steps up to the number one center position, gets all the deployment. Oh, what do you know? Now he's clicking above a point a game over that stretch. So it's opportunity is always going to be king. And a couple of things will play into that. Health, right? If someone gets injured and an opportunity opens up for you and you take advantage of it, now you're considered that level of player. Maybe that opportunity will come for you down the road as well. An early draft pick like Adam Fantilli, right? If you're super highly rated, you're going to get more opportunities than the guy that was taken in the fourth that maybe had to fight and inch and claw his way up. It's going to be harder for him to get those opportunities. But like when we talk about patience, especially with these high picks, is that let them figure out the game at this level. Let them earn the trust of the coaches. Let them find their opportunity and then see what they can do with it, right? Let them find a second opportunity and then let's see what they can do with it. So another one that jumps out to mind is Juraj Slafkowski, right? Every time he's put on the top line in Montreal, he looks like a real player. When he's not up there, he'll go dark for long stretches, right? And so I think part of that is working with high level talent around you. And I think that that's also a feather in the cap for some of these players that I look at that when I'm assessing guys too, is that like, can they play with really high level players and can they make them better, even if maybe their skill set isn't as high as the ones around them? Because I think that's a skill in itself too. Marco Rossi, another one that we were, waiting in Minnesota for him to get an opportunity. When's he going to get play with Kaprizov? When Kaprizov is out, now Rossi gets some power play opportunities. He's putting up points too, right? So it's getting that opportunity to play with the team's best players, seeing all those minutes, and then knowing that you're safe in that regard too. I think that if you make a mistake, you're not back to the third line. You're not off the power play. You have the coaching staff is starting to trust you enough, and they know like, hey, well, we have an injury. We can't just pull him out here. This isn't a one and done situation. I think having that security, having that confidence from your staff, and then starting to acclimate with some of those high level players is that, yeah, it's not linear. Development is seldom linear. We do see guys step in and be rock stars right from day one. We get our Sidney Crosbys and we get our Ovechkins and our McDavids. But even Bedard, right? He's having a fight through it a little bit too. And I know his name's been kind of left out there as people have been digging him a little bit, but he's still putting up a ton of points on, with very, very little help. But getting opportunities, having good players around you, having the trust of your coaching staff doesn't always happen on day one in the NHL. And so some of those players are just a good example. And Fantilli is a great example of it right now.
Yeah, and context matters, right? I mean, like context, as you mentioned, what is the opportunity? What is the situation? We talk about it kind of goes the other way too. Like I'm obviously a huge Lane Hudson believer and have enjoyed watching what he's done this season. But how many other teams is he playing 23 minutes a night on? like probably not many, and again, so you still have to take that opportunity and do something with it. And he has, and other players have, and Adam Fantilli has. I mean, 11 points in his last 10 games, and he had that hat trick, and that was great video. His mom had the hat off her head, and it was an empty net goal, so you can kind of anticipate a little bit more. But on top of her head, and that thing came off. I got the reaction time from mom on that one was just absolutely lethal. So we like seeing that too. But and I think one guy that I wanted to bring up is that sometimes environment and other things can make a difference too. Sam Reinhart was a top pick, not a number one pick, but he was a top pick, top what was he, second overall in his draft year. And so
yeah.
So you go second overall, things didn't quite pan out. Quite pan out in Buffalo. Like, he was a good player, but was he necessarily a number two guy? He goes to Florida, and all of a sudden everything explodes for him. It seems to happen a lot to guys that leave Buffalo, but it really is, one of those things where you can't count a guy out. And like Slavkovsky and Fantilli are two prime examples. They're 20 years old. Like, they're guys that were just outside of the age of eligibility to play in the World Juniors. I mean, it's really it takes time to get these guys to get right. And I think even this season, Fantilli, for a period of time, you're like, oh, is it not clicking for him? But there's always time for it to click, and so we'll see it. And you mentioned Bedard as well. And again, you are a product of your environment many times, and not even the best players are going to thrive in that environment. And he's a guy that still has 40 plus points. I mean, like, he is going to continue to be a very productive individual. But just remember, fans, don't give up too soon. We do redrafts, we do all those different things, and it might make you a little impatient, but that's what it's designed to do. All of those different things to get you all hot and bothered and whatnot. But still, there's plenty of times. How many times, Cam, have you, or maybe, I don't know how many redrafts you've done, but like, thinking about it, and you redraft a guy only to find out later, well, hey, that other guy that we put ahead of him was just needed a little extra time, and all of a sudden he's a lot better. So, I mean, like, that's the kind of thing that happens. But yeah, so patience, people. It's the hardest thing to come by in what we do, but it's totally necessary. And on that note, Cam, because I am evil and because I am trying not to practice what I preach, we're going to redraft the 2023 top three. No, we kind of are. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Fantilli, and I also want to talk about Leo Carlsson, because those are the two guys. So at the end of every show, we do a, kind of, you have to pick one. You take a look at a guy and you say, all right, between these two guys, this is what this is who I think would ultimately be the better pick for me based on my value system and whatever else, and situationally. So of course, Connor Bedard goes number one that year, no dispute. Number two was Leo Carlsson, which to some was a surprise. I mean, obviously the wind was blowing that way kind of before the draft. And then Adam Fantilli goes three. So let's take a look at those two guys. Neither Fantilli nor Carlsson have been especially productive over the course of these last 2 years. And actually, Leo Carlsson seems to have kind of taken a bit of a step back. So, Mr. Cam Robinson, I pose to you, as of right now, based on what we've seen over the last two NHL seasons, you've got a chance. Number two versus number three, Leo Carlsson versus Adam Fantilli. Which of those players are you picking if you were to draft them right now?
And I can't say Matt B. Mishkov.
You could if you want
to. Well, he was my guy.
I mean,
I don't. I think I had Mishkov 3. I don't think I had him 2 on my board. I'm pretty sure I had Fantilli still at 2. Hell, I might have had Mishkov at 4. I had Fantilli at 2. I very much believe I did, and I'm gonna stick with him. That was my guy. I thought he had the higher pure offensive upside while still having kind of that sturdiness to his game that you want from a potential number one center, or like a really good number two center. I think Carlsson has that sturdiness to his game. I think he has a lot of skill too, but I don't think his skill level is as high as Fantilli's. If I was Anaheim, though, boy oh boy, I probably would have leaned Mishkov in that regard, because like they got centers coming out their ears. They got so many of them that they probably could have handled slipping in a nice high impactful winger who's already probably outproduced what Carlson's done in 2 seasons in just half of one. So yeah, I'm going Adam Fantilli. How about you? What are you thinking?
I am as well. I do want to talk about Leo Carlsson a little bit more though, because he has 16 points this season, 10 fewer than Adam Fantilli right now at this season. 16 points in 41 games, 9 goals. He had 29 points in 55 games last season. Fantilli had 27 in 49 last season, now has 26 in 48. And as we mentioned, is averaging over a point per game over his last 10. And so the interesting thing about Leo Carlsson, like I can, when Anaheim picked him, I could buy what they were selling in terms of what the reasons for that. They felt he was a center, even though he was played a lot on the wing. They felt that the hockey sense was a differentiator between the two players. And then you also have the size package, the skill package. You're not leaving as much on the table. I think Fantilli to me is the better skater, like more aggressive, physical guy. You don't get as much of that out of Leo, which I think is especially at the NHL level is proving to be difficult. I really like the
Mm-hmm.
player. The other thing that we should mention about Leo Carlsson, he is on the roster for Sweden at the Four Nations. So there is a lot of belief in that player. And I actually like that Sweden kind of built their roster with a little bit of an idea of the future in mind, as opposed to let's just pick the best roster that we can to potentially win. Because I don't think that would have been a player that should have made the team at this point, given everything else. And obviously you're dealing with a different player pool than US and Canada and other things like that. But the other thing too is like Anaheim obviously took a deliberate path for Leo Carlsson. I made this, I was on the Athletic Hockey Show as well, and I made this point there, and I'll make it here, is that, you know, they took this deliberate path towards his development last season. They didn't let him play in every game. They didn't, you know, they wanted, and now as we're seeing the fruits of the labor of that in this season, I'm starting to wonder if somehow that didn't work, and if maybe it was too much too soon for the player. And we hear all the time the NHL is not a developmental league. The Ducks kind of use it as a developmental league for Leo Carlsson. Should he have gone back to Sweden for another year? Would it have been made sense to send him down to the AHL for a little bit just to get, you know, an understanding of the North American game and maybe play a little bit? The other thing that I'm starting to wonder, I'm not 100% convinced that he's a center. I don't necessarily think that, and that, you know, ultimately down the road, that could end up being true of Fantilli as well, although I think it's more likely that his aggressive style gets him in there. But I had Fantilli ahead. I also believe I had Michkov 3 that year and Carlsson 4. So it's we're splitting hairs here. And the other thing is, I'm Ducks fans do not get impatient with Leo Carlsson. I don't think they will. I'm not impatient with them. This is more just like we're both kind of it gives us a chance to kind of look back at that draft. But let's see where things go. I still think the upside is there. And again, I could believe what the Ducks were selling, and I think that there's no reason for them to shy away from that. But I do think that if you were to give me the two players, I just think Adam Fantilli is going to give me a better chance to win.
Yeah. Like Carlsson, another guy who's like a week away from being eligible for the World Juniors again this year, too, right? And he's already got like 100 NHL games.
Super
right?
young.
these guys are babies
young.
still, right?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing is, what we're saying right now is not necessarily the end all be all. And we certainly don't think that, nor should you. But I'm sure our comments will tell us otherwise. So, Cam, what is coming up on Elite Prospects? You guys got the January rankings out, but you're going to be heading out to the Four Nations and not in the not too distant future. What else you guys got cooking?
Yeah, go check out those rankings. Go check out the video. I mean, we're pumping all our good stuff out there. We got our fantasy hockey content, our NHL content, our NCAA content. I'm really looking forward to the Four Nations. So I'll hype that up a little bit more when it's maybe the podcast, or maybe when I'm away too, for it. I'm not sure what I'm more excited for is getting some of that, you know, in some Schwartzers or some poutine or watching some hockey. But I love going to Montreal. I'm excited to go to Boston for this too. So it should be a lot of fun, but lots of great content, always pumping out at EP. And grab the app, right? If you don't have the app, I think we got like 30,000 plus app downloads now, but you got to go get that app. It's great. And No pop-ups, boys and girls. No pop-ups in the app. So go ahead and grab that.
Oh, there it is. That's the sale. That is the ultimate sales pitch right there. Yeah. Well, I obviously, yeah, definitely do that. Really excited about everything that's coming up. A lot of stuff coming up for FloHockey. Obviously, we're gearing up for the AHL All-Star Classic, which will be coming up on February 2nd and 3rd at Coachella Valley. We will have a team on site there. So with a lot of content coming your way on that front. I mentioned earlier our draft rankings. It's been a little bit delayed this year. Going to be coming out probably mid-February because we're getting ready for the AHL All-Star Classic. But make sure you're reading Patrick Williams on the AHL. We've got Jordan McAlpine back doing USHL college hockey content. We obviously have a lot on FloHockey in terms of games. It's that time of year. Teams are starting to gear up for the playoff push. A lot more to come. ECHL, SPHL, Atlantic hockey, junior hockey across the United States and Canada. There is so much to watch. Make sure you are subscribed to FloHockey. We have so much more to come. And Cam, we got plenty to talk about in the not too distant future as well. We're going to certainly, as we get closer to the Four Nations, I think we will talk about that a little bit more, even if it's not so much prospect related. But if you are watching Called Up the Prospects podcast, continue to do so. Subscribe to the FloHockey YouTube page. Catch us on social media. A lot of views on TikTok, I'm hearing, which is now not banned in the US for at least the time being. So I'm hearing we're getting some good views on there, Cam. So make sure you're checking out all our clips across FloHockey and EP social media. And also, if you are a listener of the podcast, download the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Please leave a kind rating and review on those platforms of choice. We're getting a lot of listeners on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but we are available elsewhere. So make sure you are getting this podcast wherever you can, because I mean, I hope you can't get enough of us, Cam. I mean, like we're pretty nice guys. We're a fun hang, I feel like. I mean, I hope, but
I hope so too. I mean, my wife certainly can get enough. She's but what was it? We need to Puck Bunny 1. Let's get her back in here too. But,
exactly. We need another review from Puck Bunny 1. We need to bump those ratings. So so absolutely
Puck Bunny
continue
2.
to do that for us. It does help the podcast, and yeah, we've got a lot more to come here on Called Up. Yeah, exactly. We got Called Up the Prospects podcast, everybody. We will be back next week with plenty more on the world of prospects in hockey. For Cam Robinson, I'm Chris Peters, and we will see you next week.